Chapter 1: The Night I Died in My Parents' Eyes. My mother didn't kill me with her hands, she did it with a toast. One Christmas night in front of 40 guests and a Facebook live stream, she raised her glass and said her youngest daughter was dead. And the worst part, she smiled while doing it. That was the night I realized family could bury you long before you hit the ground. But if you listen closely, this is how I crawled out and built a life they'd spend the rest of theirs wishing was theirs. Snow was already falling thick over Fitchburg when Ethan pulled our old Ford into my parents' driveway. The house glowed like something out of a holiday commercial, every window trimmed with lights, a 12-foot tree sparkling through the living room glass. My mother had always loved to make Christmas look perfect. This year, she even had a ring light near the piano so she could live stream the entire event for her Facebook friends. I sat there for a moment, hands gripping my clutch, trying to steady the mix of nerves and resignation inside me. Ethan looked over, his calm brown eyes meeting mine. "You ready?" he said quietly. I forced a smile. Ready as I'll ever be. Inside, the familiar smell of cinnamon and roasted ham hit me. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, and my sister's voice carried above it all, polished and confident. Stella, the star child. She was standing near the dining table in a sleek red dress, her fiancé Kyle at her side. Kyle shook my father's hand like a man sealing a business deal, his gold watch flashing under the chandelier. My mother Donna turned at the sound of the door and came toward us with that smile she saved for company. "Marissa," she said, drawing out my name. "You made it." Her eyes flicked to Ethan, then to our coats. "You could have worn something more festive," she added softly, still smiling for the camera propped on a tripod by the window. The live stream was running, the chat window lighting up with hearts and comments. We hung our coats and joined the crowd. My father David gave me a brief nod before retreating to refill his glass. He never liked confrontation, which in our family meant he rarely said anything at all. I could feel Ethan's hand brush mine, a quiet reminder to breathe. Dinner was a blur of noise and lights. Donna kept adjusting her phone, reading the comments aloud between bites. "Look at all these people watching," she said proudly. "My real estate clients just love our family traditions." Stella laughed at something Kyle whispered and tossed her hair perfectly curled as always. Every few minutes, Donna mentioned how proud she was of Stella's new position at a Chicago firm, how Kyle's company was expanding, how blessed they all were. At some point, my mother's eyes landed on me. "And you, Marissa, how's your little job going?" I smiled politely. "Brightwave's doing well. We just launched a big campaign for a tech startup downtown." Her smile tightened. "That's nice. Maybe someday you'll try something stable, something that builds a legacy." I wanted to remind her that I was 33, not 16, but I just nodded. Ethan tried to keep the mood light. He told my dad about the garage's veterans program, how they were teaching high school dropouts to fix cars and find steady work. Donna's voice cut through the table. "That's generous," she said, "but a bit messy, isn't it? Oil and tools and all that." She sipped her wine, pretending not to notice the sudden silence. For a while, conversation stumbled back into safer topics, the kind of small talk that hides the cracks under the surface. I thought maybe we could survive the night, quietly eat our dessert, leave politely, and drive home in peace. Then Donna stood. The camera phone followed her as she lifted her glass. "Everyone," she said, "I just want to take a moment to celebrate this family." I felt my stomach knot. Stella stood too smiling wide for the live stream. Donna went on, her tone sharp beneath the sugar. "We are so proud of our eldest, who has made us shine in ways we could only dream of. And of course we have our younger one who has taken a different path." A ripple of nervous laughter passed around the room. I looked at Ethan, who frowned slightly. She paused the way a performer does when she knows everyone is watching. "Sometimes families have to make peace with disappointment," she said. "And tonight we do that publicly because honesty is part of faith." Stella's smirk widened. The chat on her phone flashed across the room. People were still watching. Donna lifted her glass higher. "To the daughter we're proud of, and to the one who's no longer part of who we are." In our eyes, Marissa has already died. The room froze. My father looked away. Someone dropped a fork. The live stream kept running, capturing the silence. For a moment I heard my own heartbeat. Stella leaned closer across the table, her voice low but loud enough. "Guess you should have chosen better, sis. Not everyone gets to marry up." I looked at her, then at my mother, who was still holding her glass chin high, certain she had made a moral statement. I felt something in me go still. I stood, pushed my chair back slowly, and reached for Ethan's hand. He didn't say a word. I faced my mother. If that's how you see me, I said, then let the dead rest in peace. Her eyes widened slightly as if she hadn't expected me to stay calm. The camera was still live, the comments flying by like sparks. I turned, walked to the coat rack, slipped into my jacket, and together we stepped out into the snow. The cold hit my skin like a slap, but it felt clean, almost liberating. Behind us, the house glowed, too bright music still playing faintly through the door. We reached the truck. Ethan squeezed my hand, once firm and steady. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, staring at the falling snow. "Not yet," I said, "but I will be." He started the engine and the headlights cut through the white air. As we drove away, I caught one last glimpse of the house in the mirror, a perfect picture full of light, laughter, and lies. By morning, that video had spread through the community. Church members whispered, old neighbors called it tragic. My mother deleted her post, but the internet never forgets. For years, she'd built a life on appearances, and with one toast, she turned herself into a spectacle. I didn't cry that night. I just watched the snow blur the windshield and thought how strange it felt to be both dead and finally alive. Then I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the sound of the tires on ice remind me that whatever came next would belong to me, not them. Chapter 2. The House That Never Felt Like Home. The snow kept falling that night, thick and quiet, and by the time we reached the edge of Madison, the streets were nearly empty. Streetlights shimmered across the windshield, and every time one passed, it felt like a memory flashing by. The cold silence gave me space to think, and somehow it pulled me backward to the house where everything had started to crack long before that Christmas toast. I grew up in a neighborhood where lawns were trimmed like magazine covers, and every mother waved with the same polite smile. My mother, Donna, was one of the top real estate agents in Dane County, the kind of woman who knew how to make a family look picture perfect. Every Sunday, she lined us up for church-polished shoes matching ribbons, the image of success. She'd whisper before the service started, "Remember to smile, Marisa. People notice." At home, the rules were simple. Speak properly, sit up straight, never contradict your sister. Stella was the golden child even as kids. She learned piano at 8, played at school recitals, and brought home straight A's. My father, David, would pat her shoulder and say, "That's my girl." When I brought home a B or drew something instead of practicing piano, he'd sigh and turn back to his newspaper. "You should listen to your mother," he'd mumble, as if that solved everything. I remember one afternoon in middle school, probably 2008, my art teacher had told my mom I wanted to join the after-school art club instead of math tutoring. Donna showed up at the next parent meeting with a tight smile. As soon as the teacher stepped away, she turned to me, her voice sharp but quiet enough that others wouldn't hear. "You really think doodling is going to get you into college?" I said nothing. She smiled at another parent walking by, then leaned closer. "You are not embarrassing me with this nonsense. You'll join the advanced math program. End of discussion." That night, I stayed up drawing under my blanket with a flashlight, sketching the same house over and over. It looked nothing like ours. By high school, I had learned how to survive by blending in. Stella kept winning debate trophies, and my mother made sure every photo went on Facebook. She'd caption them with things like "raising leaders, not dreamers." Sometimes she added a line about me too, but it always sounded like an apology. When I got to the University of Wisconsin in 2010, it was the first time I could breathe. Madison was messy, loud, full of people who didn't care about perfect lawns. I majored in marketing because it let me mix creativity and logic, the only compromise I thought my parents might tolerate. For a while, I sent home updates about my grades, my projects. My mother's replies were short. "Good. Be more like your sister." In my junior year, 2013, I entered a campus advertising contest and won. It was small, just a regional event, but to me it felt like proof that I could make something on my own. I remember calling my mom that night, excited. She was on speaker with Stella when she answered. I told her about the award, about how my professor said my concept could actually sell. She paused, then said, "That's nice, honey, but your sister just got her article published in the Chicago Law Review. You should call to congratulate her." I stared at the phone, then hung up before my voice cracked. Graduation came in 2014. Stella arrived in a tailored suit, Kyle already at her side. My mother wore pearls and talked to everyone but me. After the ceremony, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a business card for her real estate firm. "You'll start as my assistant next week," she said. I laughed before I could stop myself. "I already accepted a position at an agency downtown." Her smile disappeared. "You don't even know what stability looks like." We argued in the parking lot surrounded by other families taking photos. She crossed her arms, eyes narrow. I worked my whole life to give you opportunities, and this is how you thank me. You can't even follow one piece of advice. I told her I needed to live my own life. She shook her head, eyes cold. You don't have our DNA. You were born stubborn. Maybe that's why you'll always struggle. My father stood by the car pretending to check his phone. He didn't say a word. That night, I packed the last of my things into a used sedan I'd bought with my internship money and drove to my new apartment near State Street. It was tiny with creaky floors and a kitchen that barely fit a fridge, but it felt like the first space that belonged to me. I bought a thrifted couch, hung fairy lights, and for the first time, there were no rules taped to the fridge. In the beginning, I called home every week trying to keep some connection. My mother always found a way to turn the calls into small lectures. Are you saving enough? When will you meet someone serious? Real jobs don't let you play with ideas all day. I'd hang up, tell myself next week would be better, and then go back to work. Over time, the calls stopped. I threw myself into my job at the agency. I worked late, took projects no one else wanted, and started to get noticed. I loved the buzz of creativity, the feeling of solving problems without someone hovering behind me. My boss, a woman named Karen, once told me, "You've got a voice people remember. Don't let anyone mute it." I carried that with me like armor. Once at a holiday dinner, I drove home hoping to patch things up. The house looked the same, but everything inside felt smaller. Stella had just passed her bar exam. My mother toasted to her brilliance, to the Keaton legacy. When it was my turn to speak, Donna waved a hand. "Let's not turn this into a competition," she said lightly. Everyone laughed. I smiled too, pretending it didn't sting. By 2015, I stopped visiting altogether. The silence grew thick like a wall built out of all the words we never said. Sometimes I'd walk past a family at the farmer's market laughing over coffee and bagels and wonder if love always had to feel like performance. The memory that stayed with me most was from that last argument. My mother's face, perfect makeup, perfect posture, as she said, "You'll see. One day you'll crawl back when the world doesn't care about your little dreams." I never forgot the way her voice broke slightly on the word little, as if she feared the world might actually prove her wrong. Years later, when I stood at her Christmas table and she called me dead, I realized she had been saying that in smaller ways all my life. It just took her until that night to make it official. Outside the truck window, the lights of Madison blurred by. Ethan reached over and turned the radio down. "You're quiet," he said. I smiled faintly, just remembering. He glanced at me, but he didn't press. I watched the snow gather on the roadside signs, the same streets I'd walked home from school, on the same city that had both caged me and set me free. Somewhere between those two versions of me, something had changed. Maybe I finally believed I didn't need their approval to exist. When we reached our apartment, the city was almost silent. Ethan parked, left the heater running, and looked at me again. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, then opened the door. The cold air rushed in, sharp and real. For the first time in years, it didn't hurt. I walked inside knowing the ghosts of that old house could no longer follow me here. Chapter 3. The Man Who Fixed More Than My Car. The winter of 2016 came earlier than usual in Madison, cold enough that my breath fogged inside the car as I drove home after another long evening at the agency. The sky was already black by 5, the kind of Midwestern darkness that swallowed everything but headlights and snow. Halfway down Monroe Street, my engine sputtered and gave up. I pulled over, cursing softly, my hands shaking from the cold and exhaustion. I sat there for a moment, trying to call roadside assistance, but my phone had one bar and no signal. Then I saw the glow of a small garage a block away, its sign still lit. Cole's Auto Repair. I coasted the car down the hill and rolled into the lot. The air smelled like oil and snow, and the only sound was the steady hum of an old space heater from inside. A man stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag, tall, broad shoulders, his jacket stained, but his expression calm. He gave me a small nod. "Trouble? My car just died," I said, shivering. "I think the battery's gone." He looked under the hood without a word, then motioned toward the office door. "Go sit inside. It's warmer there. I'll take a look." I hesitated, but followed. The office was tiny, a desk stacked with papers, a small coffee maker, and a heater humming in the corner. I sat in an old chair, rubbing my hands together, listening to the faint clatter of tools outside. After a few minutes, he came back in. "Battery's shot," he said. "I can jump it for now, but you'll need a new one tomorrow. I'll give you the cheaper brand. It lasts just as long." He said it like he'd done this 1,000 times and didn't need to oversell anything. I smiled, still half frozen. Thank you, I really appreciate it. He shrugged. That's what we're here for. He paused. Name's Ethan. Marisa, I said, shaking his hand. His grip was warm, steady. By the time he finished, snow was falling harder. He insisted I wait until he checked the tires and headlights. I wanted to protest, but the look in his eyes wasn't patronizing, just careful. When I finally left, he waved me off with a grin. Next time, come earlier. I close at 7. I'll try, I said. The next morning, I found myself stopping by again, bringing him coffee as a thank you. He laughed when I handed it over. Most people just pay the bill, he said. Well, I'm not most people, I replied. Good, he said, smiling. Most people are boring. That was how it started. A few days later, he texted me to ask if I wanted to grab lunch near the lake. We ate burgers at a small diner off Monona Drive, the kind with cracked booths and jukeboxes that only played old rock songs. I told him about working in marketing, how my life revolved around pitches and deadlines. He listened like every word mattered. When I asked about his work, his eyes lit up. He told me he restored vintage Mustangs for a veterans charity teaching young mechanics the trade. You do all that by yourself, I asked. I started it alone, he said, sipping his coffee. Now a few of the guys help. They're kids who just need a chance. Someone once gave me one, so I try to pass it on. It wasn't what he said that moved me, but the quiet certainty behind it. We started seeing each other more often. Weekends became drives along the lakes, movie nights at the drive-in theater, long walks through winter markets. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words landed with weight. He never made promises, never tried to impress me. He showed up. That was enough. By spring, my coworkers had started teasing me. The car guy again, they'd ask. I'd laugh it off, but part of me hesitated to tell my family. I knew how my mother would react before she even opened her mouth. When I finally did tell her, it was during one of her obligatory check-in calls. I met someone, I said. Oh, she replied. What does he do? He owns a garage downtown. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then, a garage. She cleared her throat. Well, I suppose someone has to fix cars. Mom, I said, already tired. He's good at what he does. He runs his own business. Her voice sharpened. Marisa, you're 33. You deserve someone with ambition with stock options, not someone covered in grease. I hung up soon after. A few weeks later, Stella invited us to dinner at my parents' house. Against my better judgment, I went. I told Ethan to brace himself. He just smiled. I've dealt with worse, he said. Dinner started politely. My father asked about sports. Stella talked about her cases. Kyle bragged about his company's new expansion. My mother poured wine and corrected everyone's posture. Ethan sat quietly answering questions when asked, always respectful. Then it began. Donna turned to me. So, Marisa, how's your job at that little marketing firm? It's not little, I said evenly. I manage several campaigns now. She nodded as if humoring a child. And you, Ethan, how's the garage still busy with oil and engines? Ethan smiled politely. Yes, ma'am. We've got a full schedule. I'm also helping with a veterans program. We're rebuilding cars for charity. Donna raised her brows. That's nice, but it's not exactly long-term security, is it? Stella giggled into her glass. My fiancé just closed a 7-figure deal this month, she said. Meanwhile, Marissa's boyfriend is changing spark plugs. Balance, I guess. Ethan looked at her calmly. At least I don't sign papers that cheat people out of their savings. The room fell silent. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. Kyle's smile faltered. Donna's face turned red. That's enough. You will not disrespect this family. Ethan kept his tone soft. I didn't mean disrespect, ma'am. Just saying honest work doesn't make a man less. I reached for his hand under the table. My mother's voice cut sharp. Marissa, you need to make a choice. You can stay part of this family or you can live like this. The air was thick, everyone watching. I stood slowly. I've already made my choice, I said. I choose peace. Donna opened her mouth to reply, but I didn't wait. I took Ethan's hand and we walked out into the night. The front door slammed behind us, the sound echoing through the quiet street. Outside, the air smelled like rain and grass. Ethan squeezed my hand. You sure you're okay? Yeah, I said, though my voice shook. I think for the first time I really am. We got into his truck, drove through the quiet city lights, and didn't look back. For the first time since I was a child, I didn't feel small. I felt clean, like someone had finally scraped off years of expectation I never wanted to carry. When we reached his apartment, he turned to me. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," he said. "I already did," I said. "I'm not going back." He smiled soft and knowing. "Then welcome home." That night, as I fell asleep beside him, the noise of my family's voices faded like a radio losing signal. In its place was silence, steady and kind, the sound of a life that might finally belong to me. Chapter 4. A Life They Couldn't Control. By the summer of 2018, Ethan and I had settled into a rhythm that felt almost unreal in its simplicity. We rented a small apartment above Ellis Cafe on Williamson Street, the kind of place that smelled like roasted coffee in the morning and warm pastries in the afternoon. The cafe owner, Margaret Ellis, was a woman in her late 50s, sharp-witted and kind, someone who had known my mother years ago from church committees. She had left that world long before my mother became obsessed with image. Margaret became an anchor in our lives. She'd wave up from the cafe window every morning as Ethan and I headed out, coffee cups in hand. Sometimes after work, I'd sit downstairs with her talking over closing time. One evening, she looked at me over a cup of tea and said, "Your mom always thought she could script everyone's life. Maybe the best revenge you'll ever have is living one she can't define." Her words stuck with me. By 2019, my work at Brightwave Agency started to gain traction. I'd been promoted twice, and by 2021, I was creative director running campaigns for a growing tech startup based in the Midwest. I loved my team, a small group of designers and strategists who worked hard and laughed louder. We pulled late nights in a blur of coffee and neon lights, and every time a project succeeded, I felt like another layer of my old self peeled away. Ethan's business grew too. His garage became a hub for local apprentices, most of them kids who'd dropped out or couldn't find jobs. He received a federal grant in 2020 to expand a training program for young mechanics. When he told me the news, he said it like it was no big deal. I laughed. "You're helping people rebuild their lives, and you think it's nothing." He grinned, wiping grease from his hands. "I just fix cars. They do the rebuilding themselves." Our life was modest but full. Weekends meant farmers markets, barbecues with friends, and drives by Lake Mendota at sunset. For the first time, happiness didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like home. Sometimes Margaret would visit upstairs and bring pie. She'd watch Ethan and me laugh over some inside joke and smile. "I hope your mother never finds out how peaceful you are," she said once. "It'd ruin her whole narrative." I didn't respond, but we both knew she was right. Then came January 2023. I was reviewing campaign drafts when my phone rang. It was Margaret, her voice tense in a way I'd never heard before. "Marissa, you need to sit down," she said. "What happened?" "It's your sister, Stella. She's in serious trouble." The rest came in fragments. Kyle Mercer, her fiancé, the man my mother once called the definition of success, was under FBI investigation for running a fraudulent crypto investment fund. It was all over the news. He had scammed dozens of investors across Illinois and Wisconsin, promising returns that never existed. Stella had lost everything, including her savings. I felt the air leave my chest. "She knew?" I asked quietly. "No," Margaret said. "From what I read, she's one of the victims, but it gets worse." Over the next few days, the details unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. My parents had co-signed on one of Kyle's properties, which meant they were now liable for hundreds of thousands in legal costs. They sold the house in Fitchburg to pay lawyers. Donna was caught falsifying documents related to one of Kyle's real estate deals, enough to lose her realtor's license. My father, David, faced an IRS audit for the first time in his career. I found out about the audit in the Madison Tribune, alongside a photo of my mother at a charity banquet from years earlier. The headline read, "Community Realtor Under Investigation in Crypto Case." Below it, a quote from her old speech appeared in bold: "Family means integrity." The irony was sharp enough to taste. That night, Ethan came home to find me sitting on the couch, phone in hand. "You saw it?" he asked. "Everyone did," I said. "It's all over social media. Even the church group page reposted it." He sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on mine. "How do you feel?" I thought for a moment. "Sad, I guess, and a little finished, like the story finally looped back." He nodded. "Karma doesn't send invitations. It just shows up." I smiled faintly. That's exactly it. Over the following week, the phone calls started. First from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, asking if the rumors were true. then from old neighbors, some out of pity, others out of curiosity. I kept my answers short. I don't know the details, I said. I hope they figure things out. Donna didn't call, but Stella did once. Her voice trembled through the phone. Marissa, I know you probably hate me, she said, but I didn't know what Kyle was doing. Mom's losing it. Dad barely sleeps. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. I don't hate you, I said, but I can't fix this for you. She cried softly. I just wish we'd listened to you. That makes two of us, I whispered. When the call ended, Ethan walked over and wrapped his arms around me. I didn't cry. I couldn't. There was no pleasure in watching their downfall, only a quiet understanding that some lessons arrived too late. A few days later, Margaret slid a folded newspaper across the cafe counter when I came in for coffee. On the front page was a screenshot of that old live stream from Christmas 2022. The caption read, "Fallen family when pride turns public." My mother's face was frozen mid-toast, the same expression she wore when she said I was dead to her. The article called it an ironic symbol of modern judgment. I stared at it for a long time, the cafe humming softly around me. Margaret said nothing, just waited. Finally, I folded the paper. She always worried about what people thought, I said. Now she's what they're talking about. Margaret nodded slowly. That's how it goes. The louder someone preaches, the quieter they become when truth walks in. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, the same way it had the night I walked away from that house. I watched it swirl in the light, small, calm, relentless. When I got home, Ethan was finishing paperwork for the new apprentices. He looked up and smiled. Long day. Just full, I said. He raised a brow. Full good or full bad? I thought about the headline, about my mother's picture, about the years I spent trying to earn her approval. Full honest, I said finally. We had dinner together, talking about nothing and everything. For once, the world felt balanced. Not perfect, not polished, but fair. Before bed, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city was quiet beneath a thin layer of snowlights flickering in the distance. Somewhere out there, my parents were living in a rented apartment, stripped of everything they'd once bragged about. I didn't feel vengeance, only peace. The thought came softly, steady as the cold air. Karma doesn't write letters. It just knocks on the right doors when the time comes. I turned off the porch light, knowing that this time it hadn't come for me. Chapter 5. When the living came to the door of the dead. Snow returned to Madison early that winter, and by December the sidewalks along Williamson Street had turned into narrow white corridors. I was at the kitchen table with my laptop open, rehearsing slides for a community campaign about small business recovery, when the doorbell cut through the quiet. It was the kind of impatient ring that makes your heart jump before your mind catches up. I set the laptop aside and walked down the short hall to the door. Through the peephole, I saw 3 shapes hunched in the wind. I knew the outline of my mother's coat, even with the fur collar gone flat. I opened the door and the cold rushed in with them, a sudden breath of sharp air that smelled like snow and old wool. Donna stood in front, no lipstick, no pearls, eyes red in a way I had never seen. David kept his hands jammed in the pockets of a jacket that did not fit him, the sleeves too short, the cuffs frayed. Stella stood slightly behind them, holding a thrift store bag. Her gaze dropped to the doormat, as if it could carry her through this moment. My mother started, first voice rasping from the cold, and from a kind of fear I did not recognize. She said they had lost the apartment after the legal bills swallowed what was left of their savings. She said the church had stopped returning calls, and that the people who once asked her to chair galas now crossed the street. She said she was wrong, and that she would take it back if she could. She said please. My father added little, only that he could not sleep, and that he wanted peace in the family before he grew any older. He looked smaller than I remembered, like the wind had carved him down to the quiet core that had always been there. Stella whispered that she was sorry, and that she had not known what Kyle had done, and that she would spend years making amends if anyone would let her. They waited, shivering, the 3 of them framed by the white blur of the streetlight. For a second, I saw us as a photograph in reverse, a family portrait built out of absence. The house behind me was warm. The smell of coffee rose up from Ellis Cafe below, and somewhere in the back, the radiator ticked like a clock. All the sounds of the life I had learned to build without them. I kept my hands at my sides so I could feel my own steadiness. I told my mother the words she had spoken over me were not a figure of speech to be taken back like a headline. I told her she had made a choice, and that choices have a way of defining the ground under our feet. She started to say my name in the tone that once froze me in place. I did not let it happen. I told them they had called me dead. I said to let the dead rest. My father opened his mouth and closed it again. Stella wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and stared at the snow. I told them I did not belong to their world anymore, and that I would not open the door to a grave they had dug. Not now, not again. The wind lifted a strand of my mother's hair and set it trembling against her cheek. For once she did not smooth it back. She nodded a small motion as if something inside her had finally understood that this was the end of a kind of power. My father looked past me into the apartment and then away, like a man who had come to the edge of a lake in winter and knew the ice would not hold. Stella whispered that she hoped I would find mercy somewhere even if it was not for them. I said I hoped she would too, and that mercy and access are not the same thing. I stepped back. I told them to take care of themselves. Then I closed the door. The latch clicked with a finality that filled the hallway. Outside, their footsteps made soft sounds in the snow as they turned and walked toward the street. For a long moment I stood there with my palm flat against the wood, feeling the cold seep through. Ethan's footsteps came up behind me. He did not ask what happened. He did not need to. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and waited until my breath found its rhythm again. He said that this was what winning looks like when you are not chasing trophies. He said it was peace. Later that night, the city quieted the way it only does after a storm. We sat on the couch with the lights low and the laptop closed, the campaign slides forgotten. I thought about all the years that had led to this door, about the girl who once believed that love meant shrinking until the room felt safe. I thought about the look in my mother's eyes when she realized she could not choreograph my answer, not this time. In the morning, I went downstairs early. Margaret was already in the cafe, sleeves rolled up, steam rising from the espresso machine. She took one look at me and poured 2 cups. We sat at the small table by the window where the light was best. I told her what had happened in simple words. She listened the way people do when they carry lessons in their bones. She said that sometimes the bravest thing a daughter can do is refuse to be the balm for wounds she did not cause. She said I could choose compassion without choosing proximity. She said she was proud of the life Ethan and I had made above her cafe, and that she had prayed for this kind of steadiness to find me. I walked back upstairs with 2 pastries in a paper bag and set them on the counter next to my laptop. When I opened the file again, the work felt different, less like a performance and more like service. The campaign deck came together quickly. It was about small businesses finding their footing, about neighbors showing up, about dignity that did not depend on applause. I realized I had been writing the same story in 100 small ways long before I knew how it would end. May arrived with the soft green that only the Midwest knows. Margaret's event filled a renovated warehouse near the river, rows of simple chairs facing a stage built from borrowed risers. Women of every age and shape found their seats with programs folded in their hands. The banner behind the podium read, "Women Reclaiming Power." I stood backstage and smoothed the hem of a dress I had bought on a lunch break, nothing special, perfect for breathing. When they called my name, I walked out into a light that made the room blur for a heartbeat. I spoke about work because it was the easiest place to start, about campaigns and clients, and the way good ideas do not need permission. Then I told the story that lived in the quiet spaces. I said that some families are beautiful on the outside, and that the cost of the shine is often someone's voice. I said I had been that cost, and that I was done paying it. I did not say my mother's name, or my sister's, or my father's. I said only that love without respect is a stage, and that the audience is always hungry. I said that when the knock finally came on my door, I recognized it as hunger again, not love. I said I chose to keep my door closed and that the choice did not make me cruel. It made me well. There was a pause when I finished, the kind that feels like the room taking one long breath together. Then the applause came, not loud or frantic, but steady, a sound like rain that soaks in. Afterward, women lined up with stories cupped in their hands. Some spoke softly, some laughed at things that were not funny because laughter was the easiest way to carry them. I stayed until the lights flickered and the staff needed to lock up. Margaret hugged me at the exit and told me the city felt different tonight. I told her it felt different inside me too. That evening, I stood at our window and watched the last of the daylight settle over the rooftops. Ethan was in the kitchen washing 2 glasses, sleeves rolled above his elbows, humming an old song he loved. The radiator clicked once, then went quiet. For the first time in a very long time, all the rooms in my life felt like they belonged to the same house. If you have ever had to choose between your peace and a performance put on for approval, tell me how you chose and what it cost and what it gave back. I will be here listening.